You tell me play a Mario movie on a Nintendo console or else I'll shoot you. And I'll say, I have a better idea. Just shoot me. Because throughout the years, as annoying as it's been, Nintendo consoles have just refused to accept DVD movies. Now, of course, in the modern day, I think Nintendo's had the last laugh as, who the hell is watching DVDs these days? Cut to the one person raising their hand. Like, okay, many are still incredibly passionate about physical media. Hell, I'm still passionate about physical media. But these days, most people, if they're gonna watch a movie, they're just gonna go to streaming. But even then, has Nintendo truly had the last laugh? I mean, Netflix never appeared on the damn Switch. But at the very least, as DVDs were becoming the big thing, I think Nintendo's kind of had a back and forth as to whether they should incorporate DVD playback on their consoles or not. But Nintendo's always kind of had a weird song and dance with discs in general. This weirdness kind of started back during the Super Nintendo era, where pretty much every game console was using game cartridges. However, Sega, on the Sega Genesis, introduced the add-on, the Sega CD. Now listen, this thing was stupid expensive and it had a million flaws with it. However, the Sega CD was pretty impressive at the time. I mean, you had CD quality sound. You could have pretty much an entire orchestrated soundtrack in your video games. No more beeps and boops. Plus, you could have full motion video cutscenes. Now, of course, on the Sega CD, I have to put quotes on literally everything there. Full motion video and cutscenes. But the benefits of the CD format were kind of unmatched. I mean, like, you could store so much more content on a CD. Plus, CDs were cool. These things were definitely cheaper to mass produce compared to this. I mean, hell, look at this thing. It has screws. Costs were lower, and creatively, you could do a lot with video games on CDs. You had a couple of problems, though. I mean, for one, the load times on CD games were just stupid. And two, the cost of the Sega CD unit itself was incredibly expensive. This thing was like $299 for a damn add-on. You already had to own a Sega Genesis to use the Sega CD. So sure, the games themselves might have been a bit cheaper than standard cartridges, but investing into the ecosystem as a whole was pretty damn pricey. Oh, this is a catalog from 1994. The Sega CD launched in North America in 92, so 2 years down the line, the Sega CD was still $220. And keep in mind, this was when the PlayStation was releasing, and the PlayStation was only $300 standalone. That's a standalone CD-based game console. Sega CD was still $219, with the Genesis by itself being $130. Like, this was stupid to invest in. But the technology was hard to refute. It was very obvious that the future of gaming was on CDs. Thus, Nintendo started conversations with Sony about producing a CD add-on for the Super Nintendo, much like what Sega was doing with the Sega CD. And this whole thing was a damn mess. Years passed with this project's development, and Sony and Nintendo still made a lot of headway. There was gonna be a standalone unit that was a Super Nintendo and Super Nintendo CD kind of combined into one, and that was gonna be called the PlayStation. But Nintendo was concerned about Sony and the contract they had with Sony. Sony was looking to have all of the rights to the disc format for this Super Nintendo CD, the game licenses, which Nintendo did not like that at all, and then a bunch of other crap if they were gonna put out movies, music, whatever. Nintendo was concerned about how much of the pie Sony was taking, in addition to the fact that it kind of felt like Sony was partnering with Nintendo not because they wanted to be a legitimate partner, but rather they wanted to kind of do their own game console eventually, which, hey, wouldn't you know? And thus, one of the most infamous moments throughout gaming history in the video game industry happened at CES 1991. Sony went up and said, like, hey, we're doing this thing with Nintendo. And then the next day, Nintendo went up and said, we're not doing this thing with Sony, we're doing this thing with Phillips. It was honestly a huge you to Sony. Nintendo ended up going into an agreement with Phillips to produce the SNES CD with them. So the thing is, Sony was pissed and they were like, well, this, we're gonna just make our own game console. We're gonna take what we learned, we're gonna create the PlayStation. And, you know, this is one of the moments that a lot of people look back on and go like, oh, wow, well, Nintendo unknowingly created their biggest rival, one of the biggest names in video games, But, you know, I mean, like, it was kind of destiny for this to happen. I think a lot of this stuff happens for a reason, and Nintendo obviously didn't want to give up the rights to the software releasing on this CD platform. And Sony was either way kind of looking to do a video game platform themselves. So whatever, Nintendo, you f***ed up, but hey, I mean, I think the video game industry has been better because Sony has been in it. So you f***ed up, but good job. But the thing is, like, this is already years down the line as Nintendo's been working on this damn CD add-on for the Super Nintendo. Now they have to start basically from scratch with a brand new company, Phillips. It just got to the point where I think Nintendo just was like, is this even worth it? I mean, the Sega CD, it did like okay, but it was not like this massive, massive success. And by the time the SNES CD would have actually launched, the next generation consoles were already going out. So Nintendo decided to cancel the project. Now, of course, to kind of thank Phillips for all their hard work with Nintendo, they allowed Phillips to use some Nintendo IPs on their own game console, the Phillips CDI. Now, here's the thing with the CDI. The CDI was never really positioned as an actual video game console. The CDI was always kind of more of just a CD entertainment platform that, like, oh, it could also do video games. I mean, you can see by the actual types of games releasing on the platform, there's a lot of educational games, a lot of kind of like point and click kind of experiences. To me, the CDI is kind of like a DVD player with like some light game console functionality in there, but if it was released in the early 90s. But hey, because that Super Nintendo CD add-on Phillips was working on Nintendo with fell through, Nintendo was like, all right, here's your consolation prize. We will allow you to use our characters for some games on your CDI system. And of course, Phillips jumped at the chance for that, and thus...
So this is where Wendy's hid the real coins.
I'm sure by the time Nintendo was actually about to launch their next home console, I think by this point they were sick of these damn CDs. Because with the Nintendo 64 in 1996, they went the way of cartridges again. Now, the reason for doing this is pretty simple. They like the fact that these were way harder to pirate than a CD. I mean, like I said, CDs are mass-produced. Hell, you can buy a blank stack of CDRs, you know, rewritable CDs. You know, they're stupid easy to make bootleg copies of games on CD. Nintendo 64, not as much. And I think that was kind of Nintendo's big thing here. Nintendo's been always very anti-piracy. I mean, I feel like most companies are anti-piracy, but Nintendo, they take this shit seriously. But in addition, cartridges do have some extra little bonuses. The fact of the matter is, there's not as many load times with cartridges. So, you know, hey, those are a couple nice little features. However, it's pretty obvious that the pros of the CD format were greatly outweighing the cons because the PlayStation launched in '94 and it used CDs, and that was the best-selling console of all time at that time. With the Nintendo 64 taking second place, literally 70 million units behind how well the PS1 sold. And a lot of that can be chalked up to the fact Nintendo went with cartridges. The fact is, these could not store nearly as much as a disc could hold. And if you wanted a cartridge that could store a bigger game file, that was gonna cost a hell of a lot more money to produce. I mean, look at these things. They're so complicated compared to just a flat-ass disc. You can see the prices of these cartridge games could get really high up there compared to the PS1, where this was generally kind of the general rate of most games on this platform. So games are more expensive to produce on Nintendo 64, and for third-party developers, it was harder to fit the games they wanted to make on N64 because of the size limitations. But don't worry, everybody, Nintendo is hearing us, and they created an add-on for the N64 that accepted discs. This is what you meant, right? Yes, this is a game for the N64DD, the Nintendo 64 disk drive. This is one of the biggest damn flops Nintendo has ever put out. At the time, Nintendo had a really hard time getting these damn add-ons out. They announced the 64DD in 1995. This was a year before the N64 actually launched. The 64DD finally launched in 1999. That is absurd. And the thing is, barely any damn games came out for this thing. And it was only in Japan, and the availability of this thing was really weird. In Japan, the only way you could get this for a bit there was just via mail order. And then eventually they just like supplied a couple of stores with 64DD, but Nintendo already pretty much expected this thing was gonna flop. They knew this thing wasn't gonna do well. I think it was just kind of cooking in the tank for way too long. And yes, these discs can store more than a standard N64 cartridge, but yeah, I mean, like it's literally kind of thinking like, oh wow, you guys are using discs for games? Well, here's a fucking magnetic disc. It's like, that's not what we were talking about here. It's funny because it felt like Nintendo tried to find any possible way to show that CDs were not the future of video games or something, and try to use any other possible medium they could, until they finally decided to give up with the GameCube and was like, all right, we're moving over to DVDs. This is what you wanted, right? Yeah, so Nintendo finally decided to give in and make a console that used discs. But of course, they had to do it in their own funny little Nintendo way, because these discs are mini discs. Like, they look like mini DVDs. Which nobody was using mini DVDs. Now, the PS2 and Xbox, when these were launching, they moved over to flat out DVDs, not just CDs anymore. And that was a big element of specifically the PS2 success. The fact that it included a DVD player and you could watch DVD movies on the console. So it was like really a no-brainer at the time. Get a PS2, you get the game console. It was also backwards compatible with PS1 games, and you can play DVD movies on it and music CDs. Convenience is a big thing. The fact that the PS1, the Sega Saturn, the Sega CD, the Sega Dreamcast, all of these CD-based consoles could also play audio CDs. It just kind of made these consoles feel that much more substantial. Like, damn, I'm getting a lot of bang for my buck here. Nintendo's game consoles, I mean, they were just flat out game consoles. That's all they could fucking do. Which I can commend that to an extent. It's kind of nice to have a game console that's just all about being a game console. Nothing more, nothing less. But at the time, I think people were looking for those all-in-one entertainment solutions. And the thing was, DVDs were becoming the next big thing. They were gonna be the replacement for VHS tapes. And when DVD players were still in their infancy and they were still kind of expensive, hey, get a damn PS2. Or if you want to get an Xbox, get an Xbox. The problem with the Xbox is, while it could play DVD movies, the only way you could play them was if you bought the DVD player remote. Okay. There's no reason why you couldn't just use the controller, but now, you have to use this. Well, why did Nintendo not go with standard DVD-sized games with the GameCube? Well, I believe, again, it mostly had to do with piracy. These are still harder to make pirated copies of compared to other games. But we're back having the exact same problem we had with the N64. Yes, this can store bigger games than the N64, but DVDs could still store a hell of a lot more. So the GameCube similarly struggled with third-party support in many ways, because a lot of games just flat out wouldn't fit on a GameCube disc. You would have to span it across multiple discs, which is strange because the GameCube is more powerful than the PS2, but some games just wouldn't work on the GameCube because they went with the smallest fucking discs they could possibly go with. And I just remember being bummed as a kid because I loved my GameCube. But what was really frustrating is the fact that I saw all these guys with their PS2s and Xboxes being able to watch movies on their game console. And I couldn't even dream of doing that. On the GameCube, the most I could do was boot it up without a game in the console, and then I could mess around with like the calendar or clock. That, oh boy! But hey, Nintendo knew this was a problem, and thus we got this bad boy, the Panasonic Q, released only in Japan. Now here's the thing, this isn't a Nintendo product, this is a Panasonic product. And this just reminds me of like a big old stereo system you'd get in the early to mid 2000s. This is how you could get a GameCube with DVD functionality. And it released only in Japan, and it did not do very well. I'd say primarily because, well, the GameCube did not launch with DVD playback built in. This is kind of like a weird collaboration product where it's like, oh yeah, it's like all this crap combined into one. Because what this fundamentally was an overly expensive hybrid product where you still have to swap between like, oh man, am I in game player mode or DVD mode? It's not really a specially designed product. It kind of genuinely feels like this is a GameCube and a DVD player duct taped together and in a fancy looking shell. And it definitely is a fancy feeling product. I do love how this looks. It's such a cool, obscure piece of Nintendo history. But at the end of the day, there's nothing really special about this at all. And at the time when it launched, it was retailing for like $400+ or so in Japanese yen, that is. And it just didn't make sense. I mean, like you could just get a PS2 for significantly less than that, or you could just get a GameCube and a DVD player separately for less than that. But I guess this was just kind of the trend at the time for Nintendo to partner with random companies to include their game consoles in DVD players at the time, because there is a very similar product released here in North America called the Visteon Dockable Entertainment. This thing released in 2006, and it cost $1,300. It was basically a portable DVD player with a Game Boy Advance slot on the side. And the whole idea behind it was that you would put it in your car and it would be one of those DVD player screens that you could just flip down that's on the ceiling of your car, so then the kids in the back seat can have something to watch while you're driving. Now, I have a couple of things that I think is strange about this. For one, Game Boy Advance support on a screen that you flip down from your car. Why? Keep in mind, this is 2006. The DS Lite was already out by this point. Game Boy Advances were pretty damn cheap. You could pick one up and just hand it to your kid, and then they could play it wherever they wanted. And said this one is kind of just like, oh yeah, it's only on this screen in the back. Wouldn't it make more sense if like a GameCube or something was included? Because with this Visteon Dockable Entertainment, you get like a wired controller. And I feel like the whole purpose of a screen like this is then you can flip it down and like you have multiple kids in the backseat or something and they can all just watch something. So wouldn't it make sense if you had like a GameCube there and they could easily play like a multiplayer game or something? But with Game Boy Advance, you would need multiple Game Boy Advance units to do multiplayer. And in addition, it only worked with Game Boy Advance. You couldn't play Game Boy or Game Boy Color games on this thing. I don't get it. For how expensive this damn thing is, my God, at the very least, let me play a fucking Game Boy game. Well, either way, Nintendo and DVDs have always kind of been a little strange. But then we're moving over to the Wii, released in November 2006. So this was actually announced at E3 2005 under the codename Nintendo Revolution. And during its announcement, Satoru Iwata specifically said, hey, the Nintendo Revolution is currently the size of like 3 DVD cases stacked together. Like, they already know DVDs are kind of the standard. And you look at the disc slot of the Nintendo Revolution, and it's big. It's like DVD disc size. How the original logo for the Nintendo Revolution included a standard DVD-sized disc and a smaller GameCube-sized one. I thought that was a very strange logo, where it's just like, okay, apparently like the big element of this game console is the fact that its game discs are this size, and it's also backwards compatible with the GameCube discs, which are this size. A little strange, but whatever. But at that E3, Satoru Iwata said that there would be a small internal attachment to allow the Nintendo Revolution to play DVD movies. What the f does that mean? Okay, so doing some research and seeing other people talk about this, I think what Nintendo was kind of referring to here, when they say small internal attachment, I think a big reason why Nintendo never really incorporated DVD playback in a lot of their consoles was the fact that there's licensing fees involved with incorporating DVD playback. I mean, it's been seen in the files of the Wii's operating system, there does exist a disc icon with the DVD logo that would have appeared on the Wii's disc channel right alongside that giant Wii disc and that GameCube disc. So I think this small internal attachment Nintendo was talking about was probably like some kind of like just downloadable license that you could get on the Wii shop channel. Just pay like $5, like, all right, yeah, I can play DVDs now or something like that. I don't know. Because that's kind of what Microsoft does with the Xbox One and Xbox Series X. If you want to play Blu-rays on that console, you have to download the Blu-ray Player app on the Microsoft Store. It's free. You can just download it, but it's just kind of silly that like it can't play Blu-rays out the box. And I think a lot of that comes down to the fact they don't want to pay a licensing fee. But either way, Nintendo didn't want to do that because they wanted to keep costs down and they didn't want to give up money that they didn't have to. And overall, it turned out that they really didn't need that. The Wii didn't need DVD support, especially because later down the line, Netflix was introduced to the Wii Shop channel. And the Wii kind of became like the hot spot for Netflix. I think it was like one of the biggest places to stream movies for a bit there. Primarily because everybody had a Wii and the Wii remote was so intuitive to use to just select movies and search things up. And honestly, the Netflix app on the Wii, when it first debuted, was really intuitive, really nice. I think Nintendo realized that going into the Wii U, because the Wii U, they were focusing heavily on movies and TV shows. At like E3 2012, Reggie was on stage going like, of course you'll be able to watch Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and YouTube and all of this stuff. Hell, in the initial E3 2011 video for the Wii U controller, they showed like, hey, somebody looked up a YouTube video on the gamepad and then sent it to the TV. It's obvious that media consumption was important to Nintendo, but they just didn't give a fuck about DVDs at this point. They cared about movies and TV shows. You can even see that with like Nintendo TV, that whole debacle. But I feel like Nintendo kind of saw the future, and the future did not really involve DVD movies anymore, or Blu-ray movies. The Wii U used Blu-ray-like discs, but you couldn't play Blu-ray movies. But then hell, it all kind of came full circle, because with the Nintendo Switch, they barely dabbled in any streaming apps for that thing. Most notably, Netflix. Netflix never came over, and I don't know why. And it honestly seems like it's kind of just a repeat of the whole DVD debacle from like the Wii generation. The fact that Nintendo's like, nah, we don't want to pay a dumb fee or something like that to have DVD playback on this console. Who knows what the disagreement is between Netflix and Nintendo, but it's obvious there was a disagreement, because Hulu appeared on Nintendo Switch, YouTube appeared on Nintendo Switch, no Netflix. And it's really strange going from Netflix on the Wii, which was stupidly popular, one of the most popular things out there, to over on Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2, where they're like, no, we don't care. And I think Nintendo just didn't really want to focus on like applications and all of that with the Nintendo Switch, because they kind of wanted to push the unit as a full-blown video game device. They didn't really want to muddy the waters with like a bunch of other crap it can do, like, oh, you can browse the web, you can browse social media. Now, it's a video game device. And I do kind of respect that. As much as I think it would be nice if the Nintendo Switch family of systems could do more, I also kind of like accept that I'm like, well, for me personally, I already have a computer and a smartphone. I would not really use my Switch for anything like that. It doesn't mean other people wouldn't, which is why I think it would be nice if they included these apps on the system. But I do admit, like, I'm not really the target demographic for that though. And hell, either way, at this point, Nintendo couldn't even go in a different direction for movies, because the Nintendo Switch uses cartridges. So couldn't even have DVD playback on this thing if you tried. Watch, this is gonna be the moment Nintendo does it. Oh, here's an add-on to play DVD movies. Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, Nintendo seemingly has always hated DVDs. Or at the very least, it seems like they've kind of wanted to include DVD support in a couple of their consoles throughout history, but it just kind of never ended up working out. Which I understand how we got here, but like, I can only watch this on my fucking Xbox. That's kind of fucked up.